Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, FlyJSim Pilot, and today we are taking a very quick look at my control setup in the FlyJSim Q4XP -8 Q400 for X-Plane 11. This aeroplane obviously has quite a complex setup in some respects because we have power levers, or throttles as you'll know them, and we also have condition levers or propeller levers depending what you want to call them. So a few different axes, and what I'm going to do today is show you how I have it set up using the Thrustmaster TCA Airbus Officer Pack and add-on. This will also work even if you don't have the add-on, just to give you some idea of how I would set it up. I used to be a Q400 pilot, so that was something I have done before, but of course none of this is for any real-world use, just to give you a bit of help with your home simulations. Right, let's get started. So obviously we've just pushed back, I'm getting rid of the ground crew here, and the reason I've done this is because this is quite a good moment to show you how all the different controls are set up in my computer. So, jumping to the flight deck, no real flight setup here at all. Let's talk about how we need to have this set up. So, I'm using the Thrustmaster TCA, and first of all, let's deal with the throttles. So, I have got the Airbus throttle quadrant. Yes, thank you very much. Goodbye. Off we go. So, I've got my throttles set up to work with my Airbus throttles, obviously. And some important points I want to note. I currently have them set to maximum reverse. So I've got the reverse levers lifted up and brought all the way back. And I've set that to align with disc, because going below disc to max reverse was almost never done, even on shorter runways. So you don't need it, and you can still get to it if you want to, but yeah, it's not really used much on the dash except in emergencies that I'm aware of, or that I used to. That could not be true for other operators, I don't know. Then my reverse to my normal idle position is set like that. So now I'm out of the reverse gate on my little throttles, and that takes me to flight idle, and that's as far as it will go. And you'll see that if I move them all the way forward from here, nothing changes, because we have to actually unlock that using the FlyJSim Q4XP. So this is how it's going to be set up. Maximum reverse with the throttle reverser gate, the reverser gates lifted. That's going to take you through to disc. And then normal idle, like it would be idle on the Airbus, forward idle, is the same thing here. It's called flight idle, but it's effectively forward idle. So hopefully that's making sense so far. And this is how you're going to taxi. You'll only ever go between disc and flight idle. You never really reach flight idle. It was just enough to go from disc. Disc would keep you completely still on the ground, and anything forward of that would move you forward, like first gear, very easy, and back to disc if you wanted to stop. Going to flight idle was unusual, and then if you did, you'd have to lift it out. So why does it block it? Why doesn't the FlyJSim let you go any further forward? Well, the reason is, in the actual aircraft, there are little levers underneath the throttles, which we haven't got here. Let me move the camera around for you. So there they are, just about. You can just see them there. So, and if I click on it, you can see it actually lifting itself up a bit in the bottom. So what you'd do is you'd have your fingers around the power levers, and then this would lift. You'd lift this up, squeeze it up, and then that would allow you to move it further forwards. And you'd have to lift it up to move it back. So I can't remember if you have to lift it up to move it forward, but either way, those levers are there. So there's a bit of a difference, and the reason is so you don't accidentally slip it from flight idle. I think you had to lift it up to get it from flight idle back into disc in the real aircraft, but FlyJSim have implemented a block to stop it going forward as well, which sort of makes sense. Although I'd prefer to see it blocked coming back, because of course going into disc in flight is not acceptable and not allowed in any way, shape or form. But there we go. So from flight idle, I then need to be able to move it forward. So I'll show you how I've got that set up. If we go to controls, we've got my Thrustmaster throttle 1 and 2, and I do have the add-on pack, so I've got the full setup. Here we go. So my throttles here, throttle 2 and throttle 1, I don't know why they're the wrong way around, but there you go. They are set to the right throttles. Are set with these response curves, and this is important because it took me a while to get to this. So this response curve takes a bit of adjusting because the Thrustmaster throttles don't quite sit at exactly the right point. So that is where I have them at normal idle, and if I squeeze them back a bit, they do travel it back, even without me lifting up the reverse levers. So it's important that there is a bit of buffer in there. So for me, on my setup, this is what I ended up with. I've got 0 to 0 for reverse, don't know what that means. I've got 0 to 0.17 for beta reverse crossover point, 0.36 to 0.33 for idle. So a bit of a buffer range there for idle. The point is, I want it to be in beta and not at idle, even when they're slightly up, because you want to be able to get to flight idle, which I'll talk about in a second. Anyway, so 0.36 to 0.33 idle, and then 0.5 to 0.5 alpha, 1-to-1 alpha. I'm assuming get rid of some of those, but that's roughly what my curve looks like. I could probably fiddle with a bit more, but I haven't. So this is not the perfect tutorial. This is just how I have it set up at the moment, and it seems to be working for me. So they're both set to the same curve, and that way they work nicely. Now, what I need to show you as well is to move it forwards. I have chosen to use the red button on the side, which is button number 3. It's the auto thrust disconnect button on the Airbus. It is a real button in the dash, but it would actually be for the go around modes, but I've not got that set. So this is not realistic at all now. This is just for simulator convenience, but it's what I do. So I've got button 3 and button 4, which are the red buttons on the side of the throttle quadrant, set to power handle 1 and 2 single gate pass toggle. So this is the toggle. You hold it in and it lets you move into the flight idle range. So I'll show you. So if I hold it in, it moves from the disc area forward, and now I can move it, and I haven't pressed it on the number 2 throttle, so you can see it doesn't move. And if I press it for number 2, it moves into the next gate. So that's what it's for. But you'll see there's still a bit of movement away, so I still might fiddle with those curves a bit more, but that's roughly where we're starting from. The idea is when I'm not holding the throttles, I want it to sit basically at flight idle. I don't want it any higher, because the dash is very sensitive, and any addition of that above there is liable in flight to give you a bit of torque, so you want it as close as possible. So that's what I've got. So to move it back into disk, I have to actually put it back to flight idle, and then if I press these buttons, or in fact you can move it behind flight idle and then press the buttons, and then it will unlock it and move it back. So I've got those red buttons to move it through. So you can see here, as I'm trying to command it, doesn't work, but if I press it through it, now it works. Same for the other side, I'm commanding it, it's not going there until I press the red button for a second. Likewise, if I set them to max reverse, they should go to disk, but they don't until I press those red buttons. So on landing now, I bring it, let me show you. So let's say we're landing, we get the main wheels down, we bring it to flight idle, we get the nose wheel down, I want to bring it to disk. I've already set them to max reverse, and then I just press those buttons and it goes to disk. So that's the way I've got it set up for convenience. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to leave comments about that. And in a minute, we'll talk about some other controls and the propellers. But just to show you again, button 3 is power handle 1 single gate pass. Button 4, power handle 2 single gate toggle. And obviously, throttles are assigned the correct way around. So throttle number 1 is, it actually says throttle 2 up there, which is bizarre. I don't know why it's not labeled right, but anyway, I'm sure you've got your throttle set the right way around. But that's what I've got the red button for, and that is my response curve to try and keep it roughly. So there's max reverse, as you can see. There's idle, my normal idle points, and then there's the rest of it. So it's important to note something else. If I get rid of the lock there, we are on the parking brake. If I want to go forwards, press that, and I can go all the way forward to the rating detent. So what I want to do is I want to have my flex MCT detent set to sit in the rating one, which is luckily what I've got. So that my curve I've shown you means that the flex MCT gate on my Airbus throttles sits in the rating detent. It does mean that there's an additional gate somewhere around here which I can feel. Then there's the rating detent, and then there's the max power detent, which we really never use. So it's up to you how you want to do that. One thing I might consider doing is if you wanted to have it set so that you could remove the detents and then just have the rating detent set to maximum, and then you'd never have the emergency power available to you up here, but we never use that anyway either. The dash is very powerful even at rating power, so going beyond rating was basically never done. So I would consider that, but at the moment I have it set to the second click being rating, and then the rest of it just movable. And that seems to give you a good range of motion. But one option I might go for in the future could be to have no detents on the throttles and just go full forward would be the rating detent, because that's what we use for takeoff, and then that's the maximum for climb and so on, as we know, because we use the propeller levers to set that. So hopefully that makes sense as well. I know it is getting a bit confusing because there's a lot to talk about here, but if you just follow those curves I showed you earlier, then that would get you to where I am at the moment, and then maybe I'll consider changing that in the future. Good stuff. Next, we need to select the propeller levers. So as you can see, they are currently in start feather, and the engines are sitting there at start feather. So I have these assigned to one control, and that is my speed brake, because I have the speed brake lever. So if you have the add-on pack, you might consider doing the same. There's no flight spoilers. There are roll spoilers in the dash, which you can move if you move the yoke around, or if you have the switch. They come up when you're on the ground after landing, or when you're moving the controls during taxi. So these are here, but they're not usable in flight. We can't deploy them. They just work as roll spoilers. So you don't need them. So your spoiler axes, if you have it, could be assigned to your condition levers here. Now, obviously it's on the wrong side, but that's just an option. So that's what I've done. Now that I haven't got them set to work from fuel off, so when I have my speed brake fully back in the fully deployed position, they are set there. And then as I slide it forward, you can see it moves between the detents. Now there's no detents set for my speed brake lever. You might consider setting a detent, but that would be, I wouldn't do that because it would annoy me when I'm flying other aircraft. So the system seems to work really nicely where you don't actually need that. So yeah, you can. It seems to click into the positions. It doesn't actually want to sit between them because this is effectively FADEC. It's all electronic. You're not actually doing any manual tuning here. You're not going to be able to select halfway between them in the real aircraft and get it to work much. You just pop between them. So it's good that it sinks in. So when my speed brake is fully forward, i.e. retracted on an Airbus, it's at maximum 1020, and then I just slide it back to 900, slide it back to 850. It works really well, but like I say, you might want to put the detent into your speed brakes and do the same, because you can have the 1, 2, and 3 positions set as you wish. I've got the start feather set as the full back position, like I said, because to go to fuel off, you just click on it and it goes through, and then you click on it, and you're not going to do that in flight, obviously, but it's quite fun because after engine start, where it will be in this position at start feather, I'll turn that one off now, I've turned it off, there's a great moment in the real aircraft where you would have the engines up and running, and then you move them to max, and you clink it all the way forward, and then you get all these noises and the great spool up of the engines, so you get to enjoy that by having it set properly. And same for when you park up, set the brake and everything, engines are idle, and then you go back to start feather and it winds down and you sit there for 30 seconds. So yeah, that's my recommendation for that. And to show you how I did it, if I move it, there you go. So there is my speed brake set. It's set to prop only. I've reversed the axes, and I think the curve is pretty linear. Yeah, nothing too exciting about the curve. It just fits nicely because I'm not using the detents. So there you go. So default curve. It does have a feather point, actually, it looks like, but I'm not using that at the moment. This is what I've got. But make sure to reverse the axes, because otherwise you could do it either way you want, but it would be a bit confusing, I reckon. Good. Right, moving on, the flap lever. I am pleased to say that the flaps are quite easy because they are set like this. You've got 0, 5, 10, 15, 35, effectively the same as up, 1, 2, 3, full. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you want to call it. So if we click on the marker, here you go. So flap lever is set. I did have to adjust the response curve to make this work. Again, this probably isn't perfect, but this is what I ended up with. I'm sure there's better ways to do it. But I've got 0.00, 0.00, 0.17, 0.17, 0.71, 0.81, 1, 0.97. Don't ask me why. I fiddled with it for a while until I can make it work. But if you have exactly that loaded in, and you can just add or remove another one. So if I add one, if you haven't got enough, and then you could type in the numbers to match mine. I'll just cancel that before I make a mess of it. So 0 to 0 probably doesn't do anything there. 0.17 to 0.17, 0.71 to 0.81, 1 to 0.97. I'm sure there's better ways, but that's what I've got. And if you see this, I can move it exactly to each click on my flap lever. I've got the clicks installed and it does it perfectly, which is really handy. That is really nice, and I highly recommend you get something set up that works like that. Luckily the parking brake works just fine. In this they've done a good job with that, so you can just toggle it on and off as usual. The gear lever works just fine out of the box as well. So that's really. Moving on to the joystick, I will show you how I have it set up. This one's quite simple. Let's go to side stick. So normal, you can see I've got that glitch back on the yaw axis I need to fix. But I've got the number 6 button set to disconnect servers. If this is you using your right hand, obviously wherever your red button is, you can use. Then I've got pitch and roll, no doubt. I've got the yaw as a nose wheel tiller, which I still like the best. That glitch does come back and go away sometimes. And here's the interesting bit. I've got the trigger set to the forward 3D cockpit. That's what I always do in simulators because it's just so convenient. And then I've got a pitch trim up for button 8. Now this picture's wrong. I actually have my red button on the left, as we talked about. So button 8 is my little black button, and that is pitch trim up. And then I have on the front above the trigger, there's that extra button. That is my pitch trim down. So that's the only sort of unique thing. Everyone asks me, how do you set your trim? So that's how I do it. So I can press the trigger to look forward, then I can press this button on the back of the side stick to trim up and this button on the front of it to trim down. It's convenient to me. It seems to work just fine, and I use it in all my non-Airbus style aircraft. So there you go. So just above the trigger to pitch down, and on the back, the opposite side of the autopilot disconnect to trim up, and that's the difference. The rest is, the usual stuff, the hat switch and whatever else you want. So I said earlier I would mention what I would do if I didn't have the speed brakes. So the big one is having those condition levers is quite useful. It's useful because we set condition levers in the climb, we set them in the cruise, and we set them in the descent if we need to, and on approach. So they are used quite a lot. So if you don't have the speed brakes available to you, like I do here, for the prop, what I would suggest is taking this axis, which at the moment is set to speed brakes, but I can actually set it to none because there are no speed brakes on this aircraft. But you could set that to prop and have it do the same thing, and then fiddle with the axes, maybe reverse it, and then as you move it back, I would have it set to bring in the condition lever back as well. That's just an idea. So there you go. That would be my recommendation for that. I can't think of anything else. I'm sure I've missed loads. I don't normally do technical guides and so on for this reason. So I hope that's been useful for you. Let me know any questions in the comments, and I'll hopefully be able to get back to you with how I have it set up. And I'll be using this aircraft in plenty more videos and streams anyway, so we'll have plenty of chance to talk about it. And we might change our minds as we go through to see what we like. But that's what I've come up with so far. It seems to work pretty nicely with it. So that's all then. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been helpful, and we'll see you again in another video or live stream very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.